Hello, I'm Doug Marshall. Today I'm talking with Brandon Rains, who is an estate and business planning attorney. You know, it's important for everybody to have their estate planning done. Even more so, it's important if you are a business owner. Let's learn from Brandon some of the things that can make a difference if you do estate planning properly when you own a business. Brandon, good to see you. Thank you for taking the time. Let's get started. You know, you're an estate planning attorney. You're doing this all day, all night. One of the things I wanted to just get from you to start is what are the basics of estate planning that everybody should have at a bare minimum, and why?
Sure. Yeah. So estate planning is really creating a legal plan for the assets that are in your name if something bad were to happen to you. Right. So that's a lot of people are like, oh, what's an estate plan? That's what it is. There's two main components to an estate plan. The first is dealing with the bad life event of you becoming incapacitated, meaning you're mentally not able to make medical or financial decisions for yourself. This could be, unconscious, Alzheimer's, dementia, stuff like that. There are generally 4 documents that step in and take care of you in that situation. There's a medical power of attorney. So you can say, who can make medical decisions for me if I'm incapacitated? And what kind of decisions can they make? You have a financial power of attorney. So who's able to make financial decisions for you? Who they are and what kind of financial decisions can they make to pay bills and keep lights on and stuff like that. A third document is a living will. Some states call it an advanced healthcare directive or advanced directive. Really what that deals with is if you're end of life scenarios, using machines to keep you alive, 0% chance of recovery, you pre-expressing what you want to have happen. You want to be let go as soon as possible, kept alive for a certain number of days to give family time to come and say their goodbyes, things like that. And then for me, I like to see a 4th document, which is a HIPAA authorization document. This is simply a list of people that doctors can talk to. There's no decision-making with this. That's the medical power of attorney. This is purely who can doctors talk to and share information, right? So if they show up into the hospital, they say, I want to know what's going on with Doug Marshall. Can the doctor talk to them or not, right? Or are they just going to have to say, hey, you're crazy. I can't tell you anything. See ya, right? If their name's on the list, they can talk to the doctors. If they're not on the list, they can't. Right. So those are the 4 main incapacity documents. Mm-hmm. The second part of estate planning is what happens after you pass away. And for this, there's mainly 2 main documents. There's a will and a revocable living trust. What they do is they allow, both documents kind of allow your final expenses to be paid, debts to be paid, and ultimately distributing out assets in the way that you want them to. You're able to decide how you want those, the how and the who, the how much and the when. You can decide how you want that to be distributed out. It can be all at once. It can be distributions over a period of time. Both wills and trusts allow you to do that. One big difference between a will and a trust is probate. So after you die, if you have a will, or if you don't have anything at all, you're going to find yourself going through probate. Probate is a court-supervised way to pay off your debts and expenses and distribute out your assets. In every state, the probate process is different. Here in Colorado, it's actually pretty good. It's pretty cost-effective and pretty time-efficient. Other states like California in our industry are infamously expensive and time-consuming. So if you have a will or if you don't have anything at all, you're going to be going through probate. Court supervision, cost, time, those could be factors. But any probate process is also a public process. So people can go to the county courthouse, request a copy of the will, read it, see what's going on. Whereas a trust, a revocable living trust properly done, can completely avoid probate. So everything stays private. There's no court involvement. And depending on the state, there can be a pretty significant savings of fees and time. So trust isn't made for everybody. That's obviously a much more in-depth conversation with an attorney live. But generally speaking, those are the two main documents that we use to pass on assets after you die: a will and a trust. Main similarities is they both allow you to control the who, the what, the when, the how much of distributions. The main difference is probate. Wills go through probate, trusts don't.
Let's look at a situation where the person who's doing the planning owns a significant business that's a large part of everything that that person owns. Yeah, they should have all of these documents, but there have to be other considerations when it comes to the business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And lots of times, really, what it comes down to is, really, there's two main parts to owning a business. There's the actual ownership, and the other part is making decisions, right? Especially if you've built the business from the ground up or whatever. There's two components there. Anyone can be an owner. That's not a big deal. The bigger deal is, well, there's a potential deal with that. And we'll get to that in a moment. The bigger deal is who's making decisions. You have to have an appropriate skill set to be able to make decisions. Not everyone has that skill set. And so one way to address that is putting the correct legal documents in place that says if you're incapacitated or after you've passed away, identifying the right people to be making decisions, right? Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes we'll see a second financial power of attorney specifically for the business, because you may or may not want your spouse or your kids to be making decisions. They may not want to be making those decisions. Having someone else stepping in and making those decisions. When you're incapacitated, same general principle for after you pass away. Otherwise, if you don't have that, there's going to be a power vacuum, right? If you have multiple members in your C-suite, they're probably going to be looking around and saying, okay, what do we do next? Maybe someone who's a dominant personality, but not the best person to be making those decisions might step into that breach. Or they might be looking to a family member who just they're emotional, dealing with a potentially traumatic situation already, may not just be emotionally up for that challenge. So that's one thing to think about of why you should be having either a modification of those documents that I've just talked about, or some other things, some other documents like a buy-sell agreement, for example, which I'll touch on in a moment, that can properly align an adequate decision maker to step in and continue making decisions. Now, the small issue with ownership, which I said I'd come back to, is just because you're a passive owner doesn't necessarily mean you want to be the owner, right? If you die, your spouse takes over, they're not the decision maker, but they're the owner. Leadership still comes from the top, and that's not something that you can easily brush aside. Or if they don't want to be the owner, all too often what we see is a decrease of business valuation over time, the longer that you don't necessarily have the actual ownership aligned appropriately. And so a buy-sell agreement is, not to get into the weeds, is a way to quickly transfer ownership to an appropriate person, provide funds to the family, but it goes at a much faster pace than passing the money on to a family. They don't want it, and they have to maybe hire a business broker who gets a commission, and that takes months or years. Buy-sell can have a mechanism in place, one of many options to be able to do this, to transfer ownership, provide liquidity to the family, and an incredibly quicker timeline and time frame than any other documents, including a will or a trust. So it just allows you to align the proper active ownership, the proper decision makers, while preserving the value of the business, so that your family gets a greater return on all of your hard work, and they're not accidentally taking a discount on all of the hard work because there's been a delay of time, power vacuum that can negatively impact the value of the business.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into that. I mean, effectively what you've said So you have a strategy backed up by the legal documents to allow that strategy to take place. And I would also add, there needs to be a financial plan in place to make sure that you can pull all of this off, right? You know, to do the buy sell. That's all excellent stuff. And unfortunately, we do run into a lot of situations where the proper estate planning hasn't been done. And if one little thing goes sideways, it could cost a lot of value, like you mentioned. So I really appreciate you bringing these things to the forefront. It'll be very helpful. And I always enjoy talking to you, Brandon. You always make it more and more clear about the importance of estate planning. Thank you for spending the time.
My pleasure. Thank you, Doug.